Welcome, everyone, to this event, Colonial Collections Under Scrutiny, Researching the Origins of Objects, organized by SPY 25, the Colonial Collections Consortium and NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies. My name is Lisanne Snelders. I will be your moderator for tonight. For some years now, colonial collections and the possible return of colonial objects have been under scrutiny. How do you investigate the provenance of museum collections acquired during the colonial era? How do you find your way around extensive archival materials spread across different institutions? And what does it mean for museums to examine their collections? Today, the Colonial Collections Consortium presents the research aids that they developed to assist researchers to do provenance research. And we'll hear from 3 provenance researchers about the challenges and the opportunities of this kind of research. But before we start and I introduce the speakers, I'm curious who's in the room. Any historians? Wonderful. Any curators or people working at a museum? Nice. And anyone who has experience with researching the provenance of colonial collections or objects? Wow, there's a lot of knowledge in the room today, and probably a lot of questions as well. That's wonderful. We have time for questions, but at the end of the program. So please save them for the end. And then before we dive into the conversation with researchers Mirjam Chatanawi, Paul Voogd, and Caroline Fernandez-Caromano, I'll give the floor to Martijn Eikhoff and Wiebe Rijns. Martijn Eikhoff is the director of NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies and endowed professor of archaeology and heritage of war and mass violence at the University of Groningen. Hele mond vol. He researches the history, cultural dimensions and after effects of large-scale violence and regime change in Europe and Asia in the 19th and 20th century. In 2020, he published the book The Politics of Heritage in Indonesia, co-written with Marike Bloembergen. He will introduce the projects and the role of NIOD, and after Wiebe Rijns is a researcher at the NIOD Institute, and he's working in the project with the Colonial Collections Consortium to create a series of research aids for conducting research into museum collections from a colonial context, and that's what he will introduce. He has a background in history and museum studies and graduated from the University of Amsterdam. So please, Martijn.
So, good afternoon, everybody, dear guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome you here at SPY 25 at the meeting Colonial Collections Under Scrutiny, Researching the Origins of Objects. I'm Martijn Eikhoff, I've been introduced already, and I'm director of the NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies. And NIOD is meanwhile an institute that has developed a strong tradition in research that supports the restitution of objects that are acquired, and I know I say it now in a neutral or even concealing way, acquired in the context of violence, whether it's about colonialism or the Second World War. In addition, we reflect on the methodological and theoretical level on the processes involved. Cultural, social, economical, political processes, preferably in connection with academic and social partners in and outside the Netherlands, and in particular with the communities involved. I would like to start this meeting by sharing a personal observation. Last month, I visited the Repatriatie exhibition in the Museum Nationaal in Jakarta, which shows the many objects that have been restituted to Indonesia by the Netherlands since the mid-1970s. Yeah. Maybe I should turn it around. Yes. Okay. So this is the introduction of the exhibition. It also includes an overview of the intergovernmental history of the restitution process since 1949. And There's also animated history connected to that. It reveals that between 1978 and 2015, the process of restitution has been at a standstill, where it has gained new momentum only the last decade. Objects that I knew from museums in Amsterdam, Leiden and Delft were brought together in the museum building in Jakarta. So you could see Chryses, the Lombok treasure, the Singasari statues, the Garaktakama manuscript, and many other things. And I realized that this so-called repatriatie means that Indonesia has reacquired a new centerpiece of its history and culture that might have regional and colonial roots or history, but it has an impact, which I understood as a political impact at the moment there, that is incomparable with the status it had in the Netherlands in the past, when the objects were disseminated over various ethnographical and historical collections and museums. For me, it's a pleasure to observe that researching the the origin of objects collected in colonial contexts, provenancing, is currently topical in the Netherlands, in Europe, and also in other parts of the world. In the Dutch restitution system, it plays a crucial role. As a result, this historical work is highly impactful as it paves the road for restitution, but also of sharing and developing knowledge and new forms of collaboration. At the same time, it remains a pertinent question why provenance research plays a role prior to restitution, why we focus on involuntary loss of possession exclusively. That, at least now, is a given. Yet we can already see that it's indeed leading to new beautiful connections and also to a better understanding not only of the objects involved, but also of the short and long-term impact of colonial relations and violence. To come back to my experience in Jakarta, the objects and collections we discussed today and the past and current transactions they are subjected to are part of a much larger shifting political, cultural and social, economical landscape and the shifting relations in it. The field of people, initiatives and institutions involved in restitution in the Netherlands is very dynamic, at the moment at least. It's impossible to follow all developments. I will only mention a few of the institutions and individuals involved. In the first place, I want to mention the website and newsletter Restitution Matters of Jos van Beurden. That is really very informative and helps us all. Then there is the Commissie Coloniale Collections, which advises on the request for the return of cultural goods in the possession of the State of the Netherlands. Then there is the NWA program Pressing Matter, a place for conceptual discussions about decolonial perspectives and methods. The UvA offers specialization restitution studies as part of the Master Heritage and Memory Studies. And last but not least, there is the Colonial Collections Consortium, consisting of the RCE, the Rijksmuseum, Wereldmuseum, Bronweek, and NIOD. And their aim is to support the field. They created, among other things, the Colonial Collections Data Hub and also made this meeting, this symposium, possible. Meanwhile, many institutions, in the first place museums, have started to put their colonial collections under scrutiny. And this is not an easy process. Our knowledge of colonial collecting is fragmented, as is our knowledge of coloniality itself. At the same time, the so-called cultural archive, as Gloria Wecker has coined it, continues to create a context with images that confirms and reproduces colonial stereotypes related to these objects, and this leads to false understandings of them. It's against that backdrop that I really look forward to listening to our three panel members, Mirjam Chatinawi, Caroline Fernandez Caromano, and Paul Voogd, and to listen to the way they reflect on their investigations of provenance of museums collections and the challenges they encounter during their work. The same counts for their experiences with the digital research aids, which have been developed by the Expertise Center of the NIOD in conjunction with the Colonial Collections Data Hub. Wiebe Rijns, who I'm happy to give the floor now, in his talk will further introduce this tool, which by now is available for everyone. So thank you all for your presence here today. I think all ingredients for an inspiring and rewarding afternoon, early evening are there. Thank you very much.
Let's see. Hi everyone, welcome. Let's see. Other way. All right. Well, as I was already introduced, I'm Wiebe Rijns and I work as a researcher at the NIOD. And I will introduce the project that we've been working on. And, well, there it goes. It's not simply about the return of objects. It's about knowledge production. It's about rewriting histories, and it's about dealing with past injustices. That's where I would locate the discussion of returning objects. And the above quote by Hilmar Farid, former Director General at the Indonesian Ministry of Culture, comes from a 2021 online conference at SOAS Center of Southeast Asian Studies, and it's the core, according to Farid, of the restitution debate. It's not simply about the return of objects, but also about the exchange of knowledge on object histories and the future stories that they can tell, which very much connects, of course, to what Martijn just introduced. I'm happy to present to you today the Digital Research Aids project that we, as me and Maarten and Klaas Tutje, and my colleagues at the NIOD, have developed at the Expert Center Restitution at the NIOD as part of the Colonial Collections Consortium. And this presentation is a preliminary overview of what we've been working on and what the platform currently offers. We will continue to work on the platform until the end of the year. And the Digital Research Aids, they have the goal to make available a wide variety of knowledge on how to conduct provenance research into objects and museum collections that were acquired in a colonial context. The intended audiences are starting provenance researchers in the Netherlands, such as curators, students, other heritage professionals, as well as communities and other interested parties from countries of origin. And in the past year, we had one-on-one consultations with various experts, and the topics that are currently covered actually, however, mostly originate from what we thought to be helpful information. So therefore, we are more than interested to hear what you think of the project and what you would want from such a website. The presentation will be as follows. I'll briefly discuss the run-up to the project and thereafter go into the collaboration that we had with the Colonial Collection Consortium and especially the Data Hub project team. And what follows is a walkthrough through the Data Hub and the possibilities of our digital research aids. And then I'll end by a look at what the rest of the year will bring to the project and any future ideas. The goal of the presentation is to give an insight on what we've been working on and show the current possibilities of the website. Since several years now, the attitude towards museum collections that were acquired in the colonial era, the attitude has been changing. And in the Netherlands, this has resulted in, on the one hand, a development of a restitution policy by the Dutch government, and on the other hand, the setup of various projects that support the research into Dutch museum collections. And regarding our project, two of these initiatives are worth mentioning. And firstly, this is the Clues report, which was published in spring of 2022. And the PROS project, of which this report was a result, was a collaboration between the NIOD, the Rijksmuseum and the Wereldmuseum, and it took the form of a pilot on conducting provenance research into Dutch museum collections. And the report included a chapter with methodological recommendations for conducting research into the origin of objects acquired during the colonial era. And secondly, and later in 2022, a consortium of 5 cultural and scientific institutions was established, as Martijn already mentioned. Again, consisting of the NIOD, the Wereldmuseum and the Rijksmuseum, but joined this time by Museum Bronbeek and the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands. Several projects were set up within this Colonial Collections Consortium, such as a visitor and fellowship program and various digital infrastructure projects. These projects all aim at building trust among Dutch institutions and communities of origin, creating transparent exchange of information, and creating a singular access point where one should be able to find relevant information. Within this consortium, the NIOD had the opportunity to develop the digital research aids, where the recommendations of the aforementioned Clues report were at the same time rather technical, focused on a detailed research in the case of a restitution request, and rather general. The report could not discuss all Dutch museums in just one report. The digital research aids therefore aim to transport the Clues report into a more dynamic digital environment that's better accessible and with detailed information on various aspects of provenance research. And within the Colonial Collections Consortium, we collaborate with the so-called Colonial Collections Data Hub. And we do that to implement the research aids within the digital environment that they have created. As such, the digital research aids sort of work as complementary to the available data there. This data hub brings together the databases of Dutch museums containing objects from a colonial context. And the idea behind the data hub is to create a uniform structure through which several museum databases can be accessed. This improves the online accessibility of Dutch museum collections and also provides transparency about the collections that are present in the Netherlands. The data hub thus has the primary goal to answer two questions: what is present in the Netherlands and how did it get here? And it does this through granting users access to the digital museum databases. And additionally, it also functions as a catalyst for other museums to digitize their collection and connect them to the hub. Currently, the datasets of the consortium partners are part of the data hub, but in the following months and years, more datasets will be added. An important feature of the data hub is that users can add their own perspectives to the available data in the form of so-called nano-publications. And as you can see on the slide, users can create their own communities, list of objects, and add narratives to current metadata on the object's characteristics and provenance. This creates a conversation between source communities and museums, and therefore reducing the institutional power sort of the latter. It's too technical for now to go into the specific technicalities behind the structure of the data hub and how it links to provided databases. However, there will be a launch of the data hub later this year. So if you're interested in this project and the technical structure behind it, you're more than welcome, of course, to this launch. And Camille de Com, who is involved in the Data Hub project, is also present here today. So if you have burning questions about the digital structure behind it, of course, you can ask him afterward. What we will do now, however, is through the case of an imaginary user, have a look at how the Data Hub functions and how the digital research aids can assist in your research. So imagine that you're a researcher from instance, Indonesia, interested in the presence of Jogja silver in Dutch museums. Jogja silver is a type of silverware that's typical for the region around Yogyakarta on the island of Java. Or imagine that you're a Dutch museum curator also interested in Jogja silver and you want to get an overview of the Jogja silverware available in other museum collections in the Netherlands. To get this overview, you go to the Data Hub website and you enter the term Jogja silver and you press the search button. And what you then get is, in this case, a list of 691 objects. And as you can see on the left, you can filter your results, for instance, by the type of object or the maker of them. And via this platform, you get an overview of all the connected data sets that hold objects that fit to your search term. And before the Data Hub, our user or this researcher had to look through multiple digital registration systems or catalogs themselves to get such an overview. And this would have been a time-consuming task that acquired specific knowledge on institutional histories and also access to specific sources. Our user decides to scroll through these results and until he stumbles across this Jogja silver bracelet that was used by dancers during wayang shows. And you see that the object is currently held by the Wereldmuseum, but on this part of the page, there's not much more information. Until you scroll down to the provenance section, and there you see that the object was transferred to the Wereldmuseum by the former Artis Natura Magistra. As the user, he is aware that the Wereldmuseum is one of the largest collection of ethnographic objects in the Netherlands, but Artis Natura Magistra doesn't ring a bell. However, when he entered the data hub, he saw a reference to the digital research aids, so maybe he's able to find some more information about the artist collection there. On the landing page of the digital research aids, the user is introduced to what the website offers, and he gets an overview of all the available research aids right now, divided among various topics. And by design, the research aids also exist on 3 levels. First, we have the more abstract level, which can be seen as a set of guidelines for starting the research. Topics that we currently cover are: how do you conduct provenance research? Where can I find relevant source material? How do you write a provenance report? And what does the Dutch restitution policy look like? The second level is thematic. The topics that are covered by the research aids from this level should be seen more in the light of how objects came to the Netherlands. Therefore, we currently cover 5 topics, being the trade in objects during the colonial era, Christian missionary activities, colonial civil servants, army and navy personnel, and science. In the case of our imaginary user who was interested in the artist collection, the third level of research aids is of most interest. This level namely covers specific subjects ranging from instance from individual soldiers, collectors, or museums. And these research aids therefore provide detailed information on where to find, for instance, relevant source material or archival material. Arriving on the page of the Artist Ethnographic Museum, the user is met with some general information on the topic. When was the collection founded? Who donated to the museum? Does it still exist today? And if not, where did the collection end up? This is followed by some specific information on how to conduct provenance research concerning this topic. In the case of the Artist Ethnographic Museum, this is information on how to locate the collection within the Wereldmuseum's database, or where to find relevant archival material for this specific collection. And below the page, the research aids also refer to specific archival records and secondary source material. In our case, the section links to the website of the Amsterdam City Archives, where you can find archival material that's relevant to the Artist Ethnographic Museum. Combined with links to other relevant research aids, this creates an intuitive environment that can assist research in the first steps of research. And it provides relevant and linked information on one platform. Museum professionals that don't have plenty of time to spend on researching their collection are, as we hope, help with this practical information. And the same should be true for researchers from countries of origin who are perhaps less familiar with the complexities of the Dutch museum and archival landscape. This was just a brief overview of what the digital research aids have to offer, and in the remainder of the year we will keep on adding research aids on other relevant topics and improve existing ones and investigate possible additional features together with the Data Hub project team. And additionally, we also plan to include regional aids, which approach museum collections from the object's region of origin. These regional aids are specifically focused on interested users from source communities, since we would like to offer them the possibility to approach Dutch museums from a regional point of view instead of focusing on Dutch individuals or institutions. By the end of this year, we hope to have created a dynamic digital environment where a broad group of users can find information needed to start their research into Dutch colonial collections. I hope that this presentation has given you an insight in the project that we've been working on in the past year, and we still have a bit time to go, as I said. So we're very curious to hear what you think of the platform. What kind of research aids would be useful to you, and what kind of information should they contain? I look forward to the upcoming panel discussion and forthcoming opinions on what role such tools can play in the developing field. And as you see on the slide, we created two QR codes. The one takes you to the website of the digital research aids so that you can have a look yourself. And the other QR code leads you to a feedback or a questionnaire form where you can add feedback or additional information that we can use within the platform. And that will be shown later during the drinks as well, and otherwise available on the website. And well, for now, it rests me to thank you for your attention and give the floor back to Lisanne, who will introduce the speakers of the panel. Thanks.
Please come to the stage, Paul, Mirjam, and Caroline. And meanwhile, I will introduce you. So we asked 3 researchers to bring an object to understand what provenance research can look like and what research challenges they faced while researching this particular object. Next to me is Miriam Chatanawi. She's a researcher and a curator in the field of Islamic heritage and colonial collections. She obtained a PhD at the University of Amsterdam and worked as a curator at the Wereldmuseum. She teaches heritage theory at the Rijnwaard Academy in Amsterdam and conducts research into the colonial manuscript collection of the Royal Institute of Southeast Asian and Caribbean Studies, also known as KITLV. Over there, Paul Voogd, welcome. He studied anthropology and business administration and held management positions at Tropenmuseum Amsterdam, Naturalis in Leiden, and Utrecht University Museum. And he worked on redevelopment projects of museums in Kenya and Zanzibar, and was appointed curator of the Missie Museum Stijl in 2022. And currently he engages in provenance research of a collection from Papua New Guinea with a grant of the Dutch Research Council NWO. And then we have Carolina Fernandes Caromano, welcome. A Brazilian researcher with academic degrees in social sciences and archaeology. And for the past 20 years, she has been conducting fieldwork and research in museum collections in collaboration with indigenous peoples of the Amazon, focusing on themes such as traditional knowledge, heritage, and material culture. Living in the Netherlands since 2018, she's been a researcher at various renowned institutes. Welcome, all three of you. I will get this one. So we ask you to all bring one object. Caroline, let's start with yours. It's up on the screen already. Please take a mic. Well, what do we see here? What is the object?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to be here with you. What we are seeing is a leg ornament, a cotton band that's used by Wayana men, especially at the beginning of the 20th century. And it was an object that was collected during the Dutch colonial expeditions at the beginning of the 20th century in the Gonini region.
And why did you decide to do provenance research about this particular object?
Yeah, the research was not specifically only about this object. I was researching body ornaments from indigenous peoples from the Amazon. And at some point I realized that for the beginning of the 20th century in the Suriname region, De Goeie was a name that was always appearing on Wereldmuseum collections. And then working with a student, Inês de Rauter, we started to try to trace back from data about these expeditions that are not only at the Wereldmuseum, but also at Leiden University, at Naturalis. And then we realized that we had data of all of this spread among distinct institutions. And we were able to find some stories, interesting stories about these objects. And this is one of the objects that showed us that we could tell more, not only about the Dutch expedition and the Dutch male that were participating of it, but also about the local workers, indigenous and Maroons. And then this band was one that told us names of who was the probably person that was using this cotton band and how the Dutch members of the expedition collected it.
Can you tell a bit more about that? How did they collect it, and where did you find these stories? In what kind of archival materials?
Yeah, so the band itself, it's very simple. It's cotton. The object itself could not tell a lot for us. But looking back to the photographs that are at Leiden Library, and also diaries, that one of the diaries, the Goeie diary, is at the Wereldmuseum. It was recently donated by the family. Another diary from the responsible for faunal and botanical collections, Verstegen, was published by a member of his family, and other part of the diaries are at Naturalis. And also scientific reports that are open for everyone. We try to trace back stories that were appearing in every one of these sources, and they were slightly different, On the diaries, we have much more information about the local workers, their names, what were their roles, what they collected, and how much was paid for the object, for example, or the animal or the plant that they collected. And in this particular case, in Verstegen diary, there's a passage that he says that the only object that they were not being able to collect was this leg band, because it was a personal object that demand they don't remove it. After they put it, it's personal for the rest of their lives. But after insisting a lot with one of the workers, and we realized that it was or Kupi or Ulata, because those are two workers from that region that he was mentioning, he was able to cut the object from his leg and paid for him a pair of scissors for the object. And then for him, the collection of personal objects was complete.
And what does this tell you about the way that the object was collected?
Yeah, it was under pressure, of course. It was an imbalanced relation. We can realize that it was not common for them to don't use the leg band. And he also mentions that at some point, the other members of the Wayana group, they were laughing about that man because now he didn't have anymore his leg band. And then we started to look at the photographs and trying to recognize who could be this person. And we realized that the same man, we can see him on the left, the first one, and there he's right on the center. He appears in several photographs, including those of the travels, the expeditions, and he's probably the one that gave, under pressure, the object.
Thanks. Small technical remark. I hear a lot of echo when Caroline is speaking. Do you hear that in the room? No? Okay, then it's just that I'm sitting here. Okay. Thanks. So you brought this particular object also because it shows us how different collections can be brought together, right, to create new knowledge.
Exactly. This was very striking for us, the importance of reconnect these collections, because in our, or in the Western perspective, everything was divided, right? Plants were on herbariums, animals and fauna collections, so this was at Naturalis, for example. Documents and photographs at the library or in archives and ethnographic objects at the Vero Museum. But they were all collected together by the same people at the same time. So it was really important to reunite everything and try to put together to better understand the collection itself. Not only individual objects was also important, but the way that the collection was formed.
And is this object on display somewhere or not?
No, this object is on the depot. I can understand that it's not a very beautiful object, and there are a lot of very beautiful Wayana objects in display in that Vero Museum. Now everything is a Vero Museum, right? But Vero Museum Amsterdam, Leiden, and Rotterdam. But this one, no, it's on the depot.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next object. That is from Paul. So your object is on the left. Please take a mic and tell us what objects did you bring today?
Yeah, that's the object I did provenance research into. It's one of a series of 5 modeled skulls from Papua New Guinea. So it's the independent part of New Guinea, not the former Dutch part. It is in the Mission Museum in Stijl. And it was collected by the missionaries of that congregation somewhere in the beginning of the 20th century. I haven't been able to pinpoint exactly when. And what you see on the left is my colleague Bart taking pictures of them, and then I brought the pictures to the communities of origin. That's what you see on the right. That is Kararau village. I went along the Sepik River, where the objects come from, and visited the villages where the objects originate, and spoke to the elders about the collection.
So you already knew where the objects came from?
Well, the area. So it's the Sepik River in the north of Papua New Guinea, and then the middle Sepik. There is a people living there called Yatmu. At least that's what Europeans call them. And that's about 30 villages. And I visited about half of them and spoke to the elders there.
And why did you decide to do provenance research on this series of objects?
Because they contain human material. And of course, that's the most controversial part of our collection. So that's why we decided to start there.
And what happened when you brought the objects to the communities? What kind of questions did you have for them? What did you expect?
Yeah, I hoped to find out more about the exact provenance, the village, but that was not possible because the design doesn't tell from which village it is. Or, of course, people recognize them. But they also told me that it was impossible to tell from the design from which village it exactly was. I asked, of course, what they thought of it, of them being in our museum, and whether they were interested to have them back. The answer was no. In each and every village and each and every person that I interviewed, they all said no. They had several reasons, but the main reason is that it's not exactly clear who it was and from which village he or she was. So it could also be an enemy village, and then people would not be very happy to have that in their own village. But on the whole, well, nobody wanted it. I think.
Did you hope someone would want it?
Well, yeah, of course, it would have been interesting to be able to restitute it. And I think if we would have known exactly who it was and from which village it was, people would certainly have been interested, I guess, but not now, not because there is too little information about it. I also tried to get more information by analyzing the clay, which is on the skulls. It's modeled with clay, but the clay is mixed with all kinds of plant material, oils and other plant material. And the recipes were different in different villages. And I found these recipes. So I asked the RCE, Rijksdienst Cultureel Erfgoed, the laboratory to analyze the clay for me. And I brought plants from Papua New Guinea. But unfortunately, that also didn't give more clues as to which village exactly.
So the particular communities were not that interested in restitution, if I understand correctly, but you did try to restitute on a different level, right?
I also went to the National Museum in Port Moresby, and I discussed it also with them. They were also not very keen. They are discussing with the German government, because it used to be a German colony. And in German museums, there are thousands and thousands of objects from the area. In total, about 300,000 objects from that area are in German museums. And Germany is very active in restitution. So the German Minister of Culture had been there just a few months earlier, and they discussed building, or helping to build a new depot. And then the museum in Port Moresby would want some objects returned, but of course not all 300,000. But after that whole process is through, we might try again. But for the moment, they're also not interested. Their opinion was, well, if you or the Germans feel that uncomfortable with it, you can bring them, but.
Yeah. So in the meantime, you were, you still had these objects. Maybe did you feel uncomfortable with them?
Yeah. Well, and especially also the current missionaries are very uncomfortable with it, because it was at the time they were collected to present a certain image of Papua New Guinea as a very wild and untamed and in need of civilization. That is why they were collected and presented. And the current missionaries, of course, think very differently, and so they feel uncomfortable with it. Yeah.
So now you're, stuck with these objects. What do you do with them?
Well, for now we keep them, and we will make the information available online, maybe through the data hub, and we will add context information in the museum for the visitors, because
so they're still on display as well.
they're still on display. That's also, I need to explain a bit about the Missie Museum. It's a museum that has been developed in the 1920s. It opened in 1931, and since then it has not changed. So the whole presentation is still like it was in 1931. So it reflects the worldview of that time in every object and in every presentation, and we intend to keep it that way because we think that is very interesting, but we think it needs context, much more context than there is now.
So that colonial gaze is still present in the museum, but you try to contextualize it. That's the choice that you made for now. Okay. Maybe we'll get into this more later on. Let's move to Miriam's object. It's a very complicated object, you already told me, but we'll get to it.
The object is not so complicated, but the
The
research
history
was
is the
complicated.
history. What are we looking at?
Well, this is a panel from a grave, a former tomb. It's from Banda Aceh, so this is the capital of Aceh, which was then called Kota Raja. It's now in the Wereldmuseum Leiden. It was donated by a captain of the Merchant Navy in 1877. And yeah.
So how did you get interested in this particular object?
Yeah, the Wereldmuseum has around 25 gravestones from Indonesia, Islamic gravestones, and that's my interest. And this one stood out because of the calligraphy, and the style is a kind of regal style that you can also find in the Middle East and North Africa, and is usually used for in a ceremonial context. So that stood out to me, so that's why I decided to look into this one.
And this one was not on display, or hasn't been?
No, there was not much known about this one, actually.
Okay.
Nothing.
Nothing. So, but you wanted to know about it. Where did you start and what did you find out about the object?
Yeah, so the reason I chose this for today is actually there are three reasons. One is that doing research in provenance research also helps to find out more about the object itself, because very little was known about this one. Also because I used a lot of different types of sources to do the research. And the third one is that provenance research can also disclose larger histories, and that was the case for this one. So I thought it was pretty easy when I started, because the donor, Herman van Nijhuis, he had written to the museum in a letter that he took the panel from the large grave of the Sultans, which was in ruins. So it was geheel in puin in Dutch. So I thought, well, that's easy. I just go and see which one was in ruins around 1877, which was 3 years after the conquest of Banda Aceh, and then I know from where it is. But then I looked into pictures of today's cemeteries, YouTube videos, and also historical photographs. And I didn't see any. I found out there were several cemeteries, and royal cemeteries, and none of them had this particular calligraphy style. So then I had a problem. So it could not be from any of the existing cemeteries, would not be very likely, because the graves have a different calligraphy style. So then I used maps and books and newspapers and a lot of different sources, and after some time I found out that the cemeteries covered different dynasties, and that there was one dynasty missing from the historical photographs. I So I thought might be this dynasty was the 17th century sultans, and this is the most important part of the Sultanate's history because this was the golden age, and the famous Sultan Iskandar Muda was lived at that time, and his daughters who succeeded him, and their graves were not on the photographs, on the historical photographs. So
do you know why? What explains the absence?
After a lot of digging into newspapers and archives and the memoirs of Van Nijhuis and other sources, I found out that the Dutch, the CNIL, the colonial army had destroyed that particular cemetery, and that is in none of the English histories that we can read today. It's in none of the Dutch histories that we can read today. It's only in archival sources, and it can be found if you search for Indonesian information, because of course in Aceh this is known. In Indonesia you will find some information, something like the Dutch destroyed the grave of Sultan Iskandar Muda, but not much on how it has happened and when and why. But this can be found in archival sources. Using all these the maps, the photographs, the diaries, letters between the Governor General and the civil administration. Yeah, these are two of the maps. Yeah.
How long did this take you?
Well, it took me several weeks, full time, yeah. I found out when this happened and why and how this happened. Then of course the question is this particular panel from the cemetery that has been destroyed? And I think so because Van Nijhuis wrote that it was in ruins, and then I read several eyewitness accounts of Navy officers who entered the Sultan's terrain in 1874, and I have a description with different landmarks, and I describe a cemetery that was in ruins that was located on the map here. It was called Kandang Mas. It was located here, and this is the map that the CNIL made in 1874, and this one is an older map in 1881 or 1882. And you see it has been removed on this map, and it's now a CNIL building. So, and the destruction happened in 1878. So my guess is that Van Nijhuis took the panel from this particular cemetery, took it to the museum, and this is the only thing that remains from this particular cemetery.
So this is a very good example of how an object can open up a history that is otherwise not so easily found in the sources.
Yeah, so this was something that was not known at all to the museum. It was not dated. It had no description, just panel from a sultan's grave. It had no, and it had never been exhibited or used or described in a catalog. Nothing had been done with it, as far as I know, since it entered the storage.
And what did you do after you had this knowledge? I think you went to Aceh as well?
Yeah, later I also went to Aceh to see to see for myself. It's very hard to walk through the maps using YouTube. And I found out, this is also known that in the Dutch period, gravestones have been moved also. One can see that from the historical photographs where they were taken, and if you look at the same graves now, they have been moved. So, so it uncovers all sorts of histories, because of course the CNIL removed the gravestones, but in Islamic burials, the body is not it's in the earth. And of course the bodies have been left. In the case of this cemetery, the bodies have been dug up even, because that's in the archival reports.
And
Yeah.
when you were there to see it for yourself. Did you also speak to any local researchers or local communities?
Yeah, I spoke to local researchers and heritage professionals. They're very interested, of course, in these maps and sources because they're also trying to find the exact location of Sultan Iskandar Muda's grave, because a new grave has been built in 1955 to replace the one that was destroyed in the colonial period. But they are unsure if it's at the right location. So they're still interested in this.
And what role did restitution play? Did you discuss restitution with them, or was that not the goal of your research?
That was not the goal of my research. I was just there for my own interest. But yes, yeah, that's a complicated issue, I think, as it is in Indonesia, because if it would be restituted, it would go to the National Museum in Jakarta. And not everyone in Aceh is happy with that. Yeah.
So there is local politics to reckon with as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have. You gave a very good insight into already a view of the challenges that you face. We already discussed this a little bit with Paul. That once you have acquainted new knowledge about an object, what do you do with it? For instance, when you are planning an exhibition, Paul already answered this, but Miriam, something interesting happened with this stone as well, right? It was included in an exhibition. Not you were not the curator, but you did find it in an exhibition.
Yeah, it was exhibited last year at the Nieuwe Kerk.
Did
Because
anyone
now-
recognize it? Did anyone see it there? Well,
Yeah.
maybe someone who paid very good attention at the exhibition. Okay, it was there, yeah.
I was in a display of the Sultanates of Indonesia. And that's, of course, now because now much more is known about this panel. But it's also, of course, now we know the history and we know how contested this object is and how contested its history is. Yeah, if I would have been curating this display, I would not have included this particular panel because of all the context that we have now. It has a story that's much bigger than just saying, okay, this was of the graves of the sultans of Aceh. Yeah, but yeah, that's not up to me. It's up to the Wereldmuseum to decide.
Sure, but you can have an opinion about it. Carolina, does this question come up with the objects that you research?
For the particular area of Suriname, the first thing that we did was a public presentation for representatives of Wayana people, Locono and Trio, at Naturalis. It was a small presentation, but they were there to see what we were finding about the material. Now there's a new phase of the project about Surinamese collections. We will work together with a researcher from the Anton de Kom University from Suriname, and we will work with communities in Suriname and discuss restitution, repatriation, not necessarily about this object, but the collections that we are studying, and also other ways of showing the materials, because the first thing they need to know what is here, and we will try to find ways to show the objects using VR reproduction of the some objects, for example, but also discussing if there is any interest of restitution of a particular or more than one object. There is also an exhibition about Suriname that's going to open at Naturalis, and in this case, the student that worked with me, Inês de Rauter, she was involved in the organization of the exhibition, and probably there will be some body ornaments with seeds, because the exhibition is going to be about plants, animals, but also about the relationship of humans with the environment.
And a question for all three of you. When speaking of restitution, should it always be the end goal of provenance research? Is this why you do provenance research?
Not necessarily, I think, but I think it's important that it also that there is a profit for the country of origin. So what we intend is to keep the relationship that we have now with the National Museum in Port Moresby, and they also told us that they would be very interested to have training for their staff in conservation. So that is something I'm looking into now, if I could raise funds and find ways to do something about training, and in this way keep the relationship going, and then who knows, in future other things can come out of that.
Miriam, how do you feel about this?
No, it can be one outcome, but as we can see from these examples, it brings so much more. It helps to understand the objects also, and to find new knowledge that can be shared. Yeah.
You also wrote a blog post at historici.nl, and then you wrote about the notion of involuntary loss of possession, and that it's not necessarily a fruitful concept when dealing with the question of restitution of colonial objects, or objects in colonial collections. Why is that? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, that's mostly because when doing provenance research, it is seldom that you find, okay, this object has been looted, it has been acquired in a war context. Often the context of acquisition is less clear-cut. So what is involuntarily loss? It's a very broad term, and it doesn't help. It's not so easy to be solved by provenance research. This case is pretty clear, but many of the cases that I've been looking at show that a broader context in which a lot of things are happening that need interpretation, and that needs a standpoint today. What do we think when someone was selling precious items, and we don't know exactly why? Did this person sell them because they were impoverished, because of something that happened during the colonial period? Were there other reasons? And you need to you need to have a standpoint. And often it's said, okay, when it's looted, we will return it. But most things are not looted in that way. Most things were taken, just found, or like this panel was just found. Or they were bought, they were commissioned. So in all of these circumstances, it requires that we have an opinion about that today. And I see that opinion is not so much discussed. So that's why involuntary loss is not a very fruitful.
What do you mean this opinion is not so much discussed?
Because the discussion is mostly about things that are looted, but we don't define, or we don't talk about what looted means as a society, and what do we think about colonialism as such. When someone in Java bought an object in 1925, it's a very different situation from what I've just been explaining. What do we think about that? Is that also something that should be returned or not? We don't discuss it as a society. We think it's very easy to do provenance research and to say, okay, this has a green light and a red light, but it doesn't work like that.
So the public debate about this is not nuanced enough yet. It's just either give it all back without questioning what is all and who to give it to.
Yes.
Carolina?
I agree with my colleagues. Restitution is just one possible result. But I think provenance research is a huge chance to work together with local communities, with researchers from the countries of origin, to open space for them to participate of the institutions here in the Netherlands on the decisions that are made. For example, some communities don't necessarily want the object back, but they want to know how the object is being on the depot, or close to what and in which conditions. So I think it's an opportunity to think much more about the objects, not only the origin, but the other stories, bring other names. It's a possibility to create a revolution in the way that we see the collections, not necessarily as colonial collections under the guard of Dutch institutions, but they are part of a much bigger context, and we can invite new voices.
So it's a step towards decolonizing these collections, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, the word is being so much used that I am afraid that sometimes it loses the impact. But I think to do more collaborative works, not only for one exhibition or one study, but to build longer relationships with communities and with researchers from other countries. I think this is a huge opportunity.
And is that something that you try to do in your own research?
Yeah, well, myself, I'm already not from here, so I'm on the other side trying to build this bridge between the Amazonian region and the Netherlands. But also I always try to invite colleagues from local areas and to work with communities. My research since my master's degree was always with indigenous communities and what they think about the material that I'm studying, and studying together and create questions, scientific questions together, not imposing my questions on them.
And this more equal research partnership, it's something that comes up with you, Paul, and with Caroline. What is needed for that, like in very practical terms? How can we achieve that?
You mean, trying to cooperate. It's not, if it's just a one-off, if you have one object and you want people to help you with your research, what's in it for them? So there need to be something more durable, more long-term, to also make it worthwhile for the other party to engage in this kind of research, I think.
Yeah, this is something that you also mentioned earlier in our pre-talk, Miriam, that's also a reaction that you got, like what's in it for us? Why should we engage with you on this research? Is it something you recognize?
Well, it is a little bit different in the sense that when you do provenance research with researchers locally, and they are not interested in having it restituted, then you're asking people to help you with something that they actually are not, is not in their, what they actually don't want to happen. So that's the complicated thing in this constellation that we have here in the Netherlands.
Caroline, what is needed?
I think budget, time,
money.
Yeah, and sometimes we have a lot of discussions if the country wants the object back, but sometimes they want funding also to make a place for the object, or a better place for the object to be maintained. Of course, they want the object, but they also want help with the funding, and rich countries can work in this type of collaborations also. And training of researchers, local researchers, and inviting local curators to be part of the museums here. I think this idea of not only sharing the material that was removed from the countries, but also the money that came with then with colonialism. So I think it would be a nice way to have these programs of institutional programs with institutions from the local area where the materials came.
And the research tools that Wiebe presented today are also, a try to open up data to make it more available to everyone who is interested. How do you feel about these tools? Is it an important step? What would be a nice added value maybe to these efforts?
I think it's really nice, especially for researchers that don't know the institutions, as Wiebe said. When you're coming from outside, you don't know where to start to look for objects. You know, oh, for example, I want to find something from Suriname, or I want to find something from Brazil, but I don't know that each institution has its own website and sometimes its own database, and I think this kind of databases that reunite all this information is incredible. And also the possibility of adding information and interpretations from local communities, for example, it would be really nice. We can tell more stories and more interpretations of the same object. So for people that are coming from outside, this is really nice. I hope it's not heavy, because sometimes when you're in a place where the internet is not so good, it's not so easy to open this kind of databases. So it's something that we also need to think about, the size of the archive. I don't know exactly how to explain this, but that's the idea. Some people are open from their cell phones in the middle of the forest. So, yeah.
So another challenge might be that the database includes data from national collections. And there's also a lot of objects in private collections. That's very difficult to know what's there, who has it, how it got there. Paul, is that something that you think about working at the Missy Museum? Because this is also a private collection, right?
Yes, so it's not under Dutch government regulations or anything. It's private, and that also means that it's the objects are still owned by the congregation. The museum is independent, but the collection is still owned by the congregation. And they can decide themselves what to do with it. And they are very open to anything, to restitution or whatever. So that makes it very easy that if ever a request would come up, we could react on that very easily. But of course, this is an institutionalized private collection, but there are, of course, also a lot of private collections. And a lot of trade going on here in Amsterdam. There are several galleries that have style missionary collections for sale.
Oh, really? Okay. Thanks so much. I think looking at the clock, it would be nice to open up our discussion to the floor. I would also like to invite Wiebe and Martijn. I see that we have one chair short, so I'll just stand up. If you have any very specific technical questions about how this data hub works, etc., maybe save it up for the drinks, and then there are people who can help you with that. But now we have, please, are there any questions for mainly our three researchers? Yeah. Oh, there is a mic coming to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all your presentations. My name is Jos van Beurden, and I've got two questions. The one is elaborating on what Mirjam said, and that is that should we not focus in the restitution debate much more on a needs-based approach? Meaning that we first of all look to what do countries of origin or communities of origin need to tell the story of their people. That's one. And the other is to, I think, first of all to Paul, and that is that the story, the way you've been dealing it, I appreciate it, but it makes me also nervous, if I'm very frank. And why does it make me nervous? Because, now let me formulate it in a different way. I was thinking, why do we need maybe a consultation, and then maybe initiated by Germany, and you follow them, with Papua New Guinea? You know, we have thousands of human remains from you here, And what policy should we follow to do something with that? Instead of going there, you know, and that also, the risk of the approach was, and that happened in the Netherlands, that the media coverage said Papua New Guinea doesn't want objects back. And I think that was a very wrong expression. The problem was that the museum didn't know where they came from. And if you have such a larger approach, there's more chance of also a more public, better approach.
Thank you for your questions. Let's start with the first one. Is that not better to take a needs-based approach? Miriam, maybe you want to respond first?
No. I think the answer is very short, yes. Yes. But yeah, we have a policy here. How can we solve it? What would be your idea to to change
I thought
that?
you are the expert.
Yeah.
Well, you are an expert yourself, Jos. So.
No, but you see all sorts of indications that the current policy, which is a state-to-state policy, government-to-government, it works only partially. And you were mentioning that yourself this example of the tombstone, which would end up in the National Museum in Jakarta. So we have to start thinking together on how to do this. And I think that if you use the entrance of ancestral remains, it might be an easier start to reach communities than with objects. And you know, with these big objects, with ceremonial objects, with major ritual statues and so. But you are to answer my question.
Yeah.
First, Miriam, yeah.
I think we should also go beyond the objects, because what the case I presented also shows that many objects have been destroyed. The most important graves are no longer there. And there's a lot of knowledge that is missing, that has been removed. And when I was there, what interested my colleagues there most was not so much the objects, but more the knowledge and the sources, and what did I find out about these graves through digging through all these archival sources. Could they have my archival research findings? Could they see the sources? That were the sort of questions. So the knowledge that is surrounding these objects is maybe even more important than the objects themselves.
But I guess that was because they did not have a direct link to the deceased.
Yeah, yes, of course, but colonial context is such a broad term. I work with the Islamic collections from Indonesia mainly. It's a very different ballgame from Papua New Guinea and ancestral remains, and there are different needs. I think in Aceh this question of the Royal Sultanate graveyard is very much alive, and can be compared to the ancestral remains. This is the most important sultan in Aceh's history, whose grave has been destroyed by the CNIL and now had to be rebuilt in 1955, not knowing what it looked like and where it was exactly located. This is an important question.
Yeah, the discussion has continued, but Jos, I totally agree. This interstate regulation has its limitations, but it also gives an impetus to the process. And I remember last year, within the Pressing Matter program, we were with a team at Banten, where Fatri is doing his research. And this was an exchange also with Universitas Gadjah Mada, so this was really an transnational group. And Klaas Stutje gave a presentation about how the restitution process worked. And I saw the disappointment in the room, because the people in Banten were, now they are going to explain to us how it works, how we can proceed, and then they realized, okay, this is going to be something via the central government, this will never work for us. But at the same time, it was a fruitful meeting, because there was a community which was created in which academia and museum specialists were present, and the exchange started. And also it was identified what knowledge is lacking, what do we not know, and how can we help each other in this. So I totally see the problem, and I think that is crucial that we should discuss it more, also with our partners. I'm mainly involved in Indonesia, but the context is much larger, of course. But I also see good initiatives where people connect and start exchange. And I think that's even growing. I'm optimist always. Yeah.
Okay. You want to respond? Yeah, so the second question was about, Paul, your approach.
Yeah, I agree. It is very important to cooperate with Germany, and I did, because I was in touch with a lot of German colleagues that have these same collections. There has been provenance research on these collections in several instances, but none of them went to Papua New Guinea. And these colleagues were all very happy that at last somebody did go and ask the people themselves what they thought about it. So they thought it was a good addition to their work as well. As to the publicity, yes, well, we didn't seek it. Nieuwsuur had an item about trade in human remains. And then they called us and they said, we know you have human remains in your museum, and we want to present that in the same item. And we said, well, sorry, we are not yet ready for it. We haven't even asked the congregation what their opinion is, so no. And then they said, well, we'll take your example anyway, if you cooperate or not. That's how we came into Nieuwsuur, where you were as well. So that's how it goes with media. On the whole, I think at least in the Netherlands, the media coverage was quite balanced. But yeah, you don't always have a say.
Thank you. Are you satisfied?
No.
Was 1 second, the microphone, please. Yeah.
My main question is, whether there should be a broader consultation, including Papua New Guinea, not only with Germany, and asking Papua New Guinea, what do you want us to do with all these ancestral remains collection, of which we will maybe never know the whereabouts? Yeah. And then your visit could be part of such a general approach. That's my issue.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be, of course, it would be good if Germany would also take these steps and that we could do that together. But also in Germany, it's not all state. There are many different actors. As I said, I've been in touch with as many as I could locate, identify. And so I think this is a good first step.
Well, let's move on to the next question. Let's leave it here and maybe continue over drinks. I see one hand over there.
Hi, Eddie Appels, Missie Museum style also, for the moment. Yeah, I don't know how to put it. I have this problem that I just curated an exhibition on colonial cinema in Indonesia in the 30s. And I get all these questions from this island, which is Flores. Can we see the films? How can we see the films? How can we access the files? And we're working together with somebody from the University of Amsterdam who did the Jaap Kunst collection. And they did the restitution. So my problem is mainly how do we restitute immaterial heritage? Film, photography, sound, songs. You could always say, somebody took the shot, so it's their copyright, but the copyright is here in the Netherlands and not over there. So I don't know if this is a part of the whole database, but it's a problem we are faced with. Who owns the images, and should we return them, and how should we return them, and put them on the internet is not enough, because a lot of people don't have access to the internet, or they don't have the copyrights. If I want to use the films, I have to ask the film museum and not the people over there who were in the films. Anyway, that's a problem.
So we've been talking about objects a lot, but what about immaterial heritage? Any ideas? I see you nodding, Caroline. No? Oh.
No, I like your question, but I don't know the answer. I agree with you. I also don't know VB what they do.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the question. I don't think I can form a definitive answer, since this is exactly, of course, one of the problems that you run into with these kind of collections. One thing that you could do is digitize them, but as you said, copyright comes into play as well. I think there are a lot of possibilities within the digital restitution environment in that sense, creating such data hubs, being transparent about what is available in the Netherlands. That also connects to the exchange of knowledge. But it might not be enough. As Caroline also mentioned, people don't have access to internet, then you need to work around that. Yeah, I think we haven't come to a part in the discussion where we have a final solution for these kind of problems. So try it out. Have a conversation with the people there. Try to see what the film museum in this sense can do. Maybe they can send copies. I don't know. I don't know how it connects to the policy. These kind of objects. So maybe there's a bit more space to work around.
Yeah, you can say, and then after Martijn. Yeah.
Almost all the old film material of the Congregation of Stijl is either at Beeld en Geluid in Hilversum or at iFilm Museum. And even we have to pay quite heavily to use it. So I think it's almost impossible for people from the countries of origin to access it. So I think it's really a problem, yeah.
Yeah, the more open access, the better, I would say. I once had a student who studied an image collection which was open for everybody from the Moluccas, a certain island, I don't remember which one, and that was translated, because not many people had access to internet there, into t-shirts. So everybody was wearing t-shirts with these images on it, and that's also how things travel. I think I'm very optimistic today, but people find ways to get beyond the copyright problems and the closed archives we have here. Yeah.
Thanks. I see a few questions. Let's start. You were first, man with the blue jacket. There's a microphone coming your way.
Mijn naam is Hans van der Bunten. Ik heb bij het Tropenmuseum gewerkt, samen met Mirjam onder andere. Maar ik heb daarna ook...
Can you do it in English?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My name is Hans van der Bunten. I worked at the Tropenmuseum. But besides that, I've also worked in Sarawak in Borneo for 6 years. And I've been helping there on developing a museum, and I've also been repatriating collections to that museum. And we've worked with communities, and I think where we make very small steps in the Netherlands, it is going forward. We're moving there, but it will take a couple of 100 years if we go in this speed. And there will always be a government who will stop this in the Netherlands or in Europe. Time will pass, and that's it. I believe what was the question in Borneo the most is how can we see in which collection are which objects which we find relevant. So looking at needs is very important, especially for the local communities. And I think the other thing to look into, and it's not so much open access, but it's a step further, is looking at how we can transfer intellectual property rights to the local owners who made the objects in those days, who have the experience, who have the knowledge. Mostly, I've got multiple examples of objects which were brought to Borneo, and within 1 second, everybody knew what the object was about. Everybody knew the relevance. Everybody knew. They didn't know if it was 15 centimeters or 16 centimeters in height, and if it was 100 grams or 120 grams, because that's the knowledge we want to know about objects in the Netherlands. It's all factual knowledge. Over there, it is contextual knowledge, which is much more related and much more important. So the real answer can be given by the local communities itself, and that's where we have to focus on.
Thanks for your remark. Do you have a specific question about this for the panel that you would like to ask, or just a general response? Yeah. Who would like to respond? Anybody who has experience with local communities and contextual knowledge, maybe? No? Okay, then. Yeah. Then I move on to the questions that were already there. Or is this a response to this? A reaction? Okay. Yeah, Klaas and. Yeah.
Because this is your reaction to what you were saying. Because in a way, I really agree. But it can also be too easy to say we need their knowledge and we need to focus on them, because it's a puzzle that we have to do together. Because one of the first steps then is, how do they know which collections are here? So it's also our knowledge, so to say, our knowledge in our archives, in the inventory books, in etc., to make clear to them that the collections are actually here in this and that museum. So it's the knowledge that you need from both sides, and only then you can connect histories and make steps. For instance, adding the information that they have over there. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I want to move on to the next questions. We don't have that much time, so please keep your questions a bit short, ending with question mark preferably. I see someone over there with the grey shirt. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Sabine Bolk. I do a lot of provenance research myself, and my question is specifically on the data hub. I noticed that it provides very limited information that is provided already on the database of the museums itself. And my question is, if you really want to dive into it, is there willingness from the museums that they provide the inventory cards and extra insights, or are these things that will be added to the data hub eventually? Because at the moment I noticed that it's just an image of the object and what is already in the digital database.
I think this is a question for Wiebe.
Yeah, and also a question maybe more for Camille to answer maybe later. As I said in my presentation, I'm personally not that much involved in the data hub behind it, but there is a lot of openness within Dutch museums to, they know about the changing attitude towards the collection. So if you want to know more about it, that is also the information that we provide in our research aids. Is the Wereldmuseum, for instance, has an email address that you can just send your questions to, and they will get back to you. And the information that is provided on the data hub, and if I say it correctly, and otherwise Camille maybe corrects me, is indeed the information that is also provided in the Wereldmuseum's database in this case, or in the Rijksmuseum database. So if you really want to deep dive, that is sort of the next step, and I think these, the hub and also the research aids are mainly for the people for their first steps. Like if you want to see a document yourself, then you of course need to go to the archive in the end. So then it would be a next step to digitize these documents as well, make them available. So this is all, yeah, we're in the beginning phase of that as well. Yeah, I think there was a third person with a question sitting for a while already. Maybe you in the green shirt. And after that, we do one last question.
Hi, my name is Francis. I'm a master's student here at UvA, and I'm doing my thesis on decolonizing museums. So I wanted to ask Caroline, but I'm curious about all of your opinions. You said you wanted to stay away from using the word decolonizing, but I think this is part, or could be part of decolonizing museums. So could you elaborate a bit more on that, and how can we prevent decolonizing becoming a buzzword?
I'm not going away. I'm just thinking that sometimes the word is overused. So I'm afraid sometimes it's reduced, oh, this is decolonization. Let's do this. And every simple research that is being made is called decolonization. It's not really, right? So, yeah, I think the main point is that this partnership needs to be made. I cannot believe that we can do decolonization only with European researchers talking about that specific collection, for example. This is not it, although the main sources that we use are from people from the the global north, right? So we should start to think about researchers and other people from the global south and include it in our decolonization approach. So that's why I'm very critical about the overuse, not about the existence. I hope it keeps existing, but we need to always think if we are really doing that.
Thanks. Good remark. Let's finish with one last question. Oh, ja, nee, toch niet? Yeah, I see a careful hand with you in the white and blue shirt. Yeah.
Thank you for the discussion. I had a question also for Caroline about, drawing on from what Miriam said about how provenance research can bring about much broader knowledge about different histories. I was wondering how your research into the different collections that are spread around different museums, which also tells a lot of stories in itself, if that brought new knowledge about the context in which they were collected, the expeditions, what were the objectives of the expeditions? You could mention plants and seeds, but also sort of cultural objects, let's say. Just curious about that.
Yeah, the funny thing, that provenance research was not my objective, right? My objective was a scientific object to try to find out what species people were using for their body ornaments. So I was trying to understand how people related to plants. So, but when I started to look at the objects in the collection, I said, no, but this is a great thing to think about provenance for some collections. And it was possible to reconnect. I think this is the main thing. So I know now, for example, we know now where a specific object, necklace, was collected, but also that at the same day, a plant that's now part of the herbarium, it was part of the Utrecht herbarium, and now it's Naturalis herbarium, it was collected at the same day, sometimes for the same maroon worker, for example. And we can add these names. They are not on our labels. When you open the database of Naturalis, you will find Verstegen when you're looking for material from the same area in the same period. You will not find Cupine, you will not find Ulata, but they were working. And sometimes those researchers in their diaries, they are saying, oh, this person is very good collecting lizards. So I'm asking him to collect more, or oh, we lost today a fish, but some other worker collected a monkey. So we can add this data also to natural history collections. I think this for me was very nice, because for ethnographic museums we are discussing a lot about paying attention on local workers, but for natural history collections, not yet. I think now it's growing a lot, and I think this is something that happened with this research.
So very practically, you would just look into different collections with the same terminology, for instance, Verstegen, and then you would piece it all together? Is that how it works?
Yeah, but we cannot only look for Verstegen. If I go to the Wereldmuseum database and I look Verstegen, I will probably find nothing or very little information, because he was the botanist and the zoologist. But if you look at the Naturalis, you will not find the Goeie, because this one was responsible for the ethnographic collection. So that's why we need to know a little bit more about the expeditions and who was part of the expedition and how the material was divided. And I think this was very nice. But this is a very special context, right? We have a huge scientific expedition mapping the Suriname area, and then they were collecting a lot of material, minerals, everything.
Thank you. Well, we could continue talking for hours, but we can't. So I want to thank all the speakers, researchers, and everyone, also the audience, for your very valuable contributions. You can continue the conversation over drinks. Thank you so much.